constitutional democracy distrusts majorities by its very nature. The miseducation is to teach people to accept that which is unjust, that which is distorted about who they are, that which socially, spiritually, physically, economically degrades them. I was tired of being part of something later I felt was an extrajudicial pursuit of somebody for threats that have nothing to do with ethics. Really, if there is a judge in this country who will tell me he's never discussed intricacies of a matter with another judge, he must not be trusted. You know, judges vote. And so this idea that they have no political preferences is a myth, it's a lie. The fact that they vote means they have political preferences. There was no evidence that Zuma, no one presented evidence that Zuma took money or was corrupt. Nobody did. You know, when I say there's something wrong with our court, I'm not saying out of malice. I'm saying out of a really constructive desire that we reflect, we think again. And that's why I'm so happy at this point, because I think we have a new Chief Justice. There's a beginning of a change. And I think we need new thinking, new people. I think all commissions politically, as much as they are designed to do the right thing, politicians sometimes tend to use commissions to confirm an outcome they want.
Sikhakhane, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us on NCAT in Law.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much for this really inspiring book. I'm hoping that it'll get South Africa talking. It raises issues about which South Africans should be talking about, right?
Yeah.
Before we get to the more controversial issues that you raise in the book, can you tell us what your philosophy is, how your outlook on life is that informs the writing of a book like this?
Well, is that society is more important than those who rule it, right? And that governments in general and all institutions must be structured in such a way that everything they do is to serve society collectively, and that all resources of the state, particularly natural ones, must be managed in every society in such a way that they benefit, the resources benefit the occupants, those who inhabit the earth or that particular geographical area, which we call a country.
All right. Well, let me ask a question that I normally put to judges. If you were a judge, would you say a court of law or a court is a court of law or a court of justice?
Well, it should be a court of justice. I've always said that it should be a court of justice because justice includes law, but law does not include justice.
All right. Well, that's quite profound. This book is obviously written with a target audience in mind. Who's that?
Right, I'll give you the specific, but I was trying to bridge what I see in writings on political theory and legal theory and everything in society. It's either it's academics and elites talking to one another, and the majority of the people cannot follow, not because the majority is not literate, but it's just academic speak. And all papers that academics write. And so I was trying to bridge the gap between dense ideological questions with accessibility to ordinary people that are literate, that can read. So my target audience was generally people, the majority of people about whom we analyze society. But also I wanted to speak to the educated, the elites, the academics, the judges, the advocates, most of whom speak to each other about society. So those were this book is a bridge. That is, I was very happy when in Durban, I saw a waitress read my book and found it readable and asking me what I meant about certain things. And for me, that was an achievement, because I didn't want a book that an ordinary literate person thinks it's talking about me, but I don't know what it says. But I also wanted an academic, as they will, read and critique this and still be able to see the ideological and philosophical questions I'm talking about.
Yeah, we'll get to some of the people who are the targets of this book in a moment, the judiciary in particular. This is the book we are talking about. It's Odyssey of Liberation, a memoir of a rebel advocate. Why rebel advocate?
It's because I chose the word rebel not because I'm any more revolutionary than others. It's because I think an advocate should be a person that rebels against constraints. And I actually think the world in general has been moved by rebels, by people who don't conform, people who get out of the boundaries. Galileo was a nonconformist, and many people. No one has moved the world by being conformist and apathetic. And so I'm a rebel in that way, in that I've always sought to analyze the boundaries and what they are, and see the world from the outside of the set boundaries.
Not in the sense of the rebel advocates who've never gone to do pupillage and so on. What in Cape Town we call brookies. You're not talking about that kind.
Well, it's like people who say a revolutionary or a communist or a rebel it's a negative term. What you're saying to me is how these terms called rebel, revolutionary, have been contaminated to mean something negative. When they don't, they're about someone who's nonconformist, which is the only group of people that have moved the world in academia, in social science, in mathematics. It's people who've tried to see the world from outside the existing boundaries. That's a rebel, that's a nonconformist, that's a revolutionary.
Right. Part of what you discuss in the book is the way South Africa relates to the courts and the way the courts relates to the governance in the country. Can we talk about constitutional democracy and whether South Africa fits the mold of a constitutional democracy?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I think I was having a private conversation once with you that South Africa, maybe the whole world, we're like little children with a chart and crayons of different colors, and we think we are changing the chart when we're changing colors of the crayons. The word constitutional democracy it's not insignificant that your adjective is constitutional. It could be democratic constitutionalism.
What's the significance of the word?
It's because constitutional democracies have placed the word constitutional before the word democracy in order to create a set of rules whose main emphasis, while it gives rights to everybody and how the state is governed, is to limit powers of majorities. Therefore, constitutional democracy distrusts majorities by its very nature. So it's a liberal notion that distrusts majorities. Fanon actually talks about this, talks about why not switch the words around? Why is it not democratic constitutionalism, which means you first accept that the majority is an important component for protection and their views. But this is not without ahistorical. Democracy is not a timeless concept. It's also circumstances specific about each country. So I think in post-colonial countries, liberal democracies or proponents of liberal democracy in the modern world, in post-colonial states, use liberal notions of democracy because they are not trusting of black majorities that emerge from the colonial political setup. But we need to think outside that. And that's why I'm introducing to you a term. Why don't we call it democratic constitutionalism? Because it's important which an adjective you use to describe what.
So in your democratic constitutionalism, let me see if I understand you correctly. You're saying democracy would then be the dominant feature and constitutionalism would be subjected to democracy.
Absolutely. And I'm not a liberal. And I'm not saying it's an insult to be liberal.
Yeah.
But what we are taught to think is that there's nothing else that works. No, that's just a choice. And political scientists will tell you that there is a variety of choices of how to govern and how to run courts and how to run states. Unfortunately, in South Africa, because we are not taught critical thinking, in fact, it's discouraged. When we are taught law and jurisprudence and all of this, we are not taught that this is just but one way of seeing the world and these liberal notions of what the law is. And so what I'm saying is that we must start teaching alternative legal thinking, alternative political thinking, alternative ideological exploration of how societies run, given their history. As I said in the beginning, constitutions do not have timeless authority.
All right. Let's go to a specific example.
Sure.
Of what I think is a constitutional democracy at play, where the courts would determine what could happen in a democracy rather than the democratic processes themselves determining what could happen. Some time ago, you'll recall President Zuma reshuffled his cabinet. I think he reshuffled the Minister of Finance at that time.
I was involved in that case.
You were involved in that case. And the opposition party at the time, I think was the Democratic Alliance, went to court to challenge that and went a Rule 53 application review to have Parliament give reasons why the president fired, as it were, I think it was Pravin Gordhan.
Yeah.
Would you say that is constitutional democracy at play?
Yeah, it's subjecting democratic processes to minority thinking.
What should have happened rather than having courts determine this issue?
It should end with the choices of the president who represents the people and parliament that represents the people. Each structure that makes decisions is susceptible to making mistakes. But countries must choose whether you want mistakes made by unelected people or mistakes made by those elected by the people. And liberal democracies tell us, particularly how they are imposed on African majorities. You are safer with a single judge. You are safer with 11 judges. Who said these people vote? They vote, they have political preferences. It's not safe at all, it's just a preference. And so we need to we need to start debates about the fact that societies, given their history, are governed in different ways. And lawyers in particular have been particularly bad about this, is that we imbibe what we are told so much so that we are unable to know that there's a multiplicity of theories of how to run the state.
Okay, the last issue in this segment.
And by the way, on this question of this court, and you haven't had anybody since then asking any president to produce notes from his advisors or from somebody for why they've reshuffled. It shows you the pretense of it all. It had nothing to do with democracy. It had nothing to do with governance or accountability. It was a political choice of political opponents at the time. None of them. They were not principled about it.
Yes, I think you're referring to the recent reshuffling by the current president of the Minister of Justice to another portfolio. And as I recall, there hasn't been an application to court.
No one has asked him to give notes of those who advised him. It's bizarre that people would say a president must give notes. The court said the president must give notes from advisors.
The former president, you mean?
The former president in
Zuma.
that case. I mean, we all know it's bizarre to make that demand, but because societies are pretentious, powerful forces in society are pretentious about what they want, they've never asked for it for any other reshuffle.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mhlekazi. We'll take a short break and we'll deal with, in the second segment with other issues.
Thank you.
Part of what you write about in this book is the miseducation of the black child.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us more about that?
Well, I think in order to sustain colonial invasion, in order to sustain colonial control of a people, you need to teach them to be submissive. You need to teach them to accept that as you colonize them, they shouldn't protest, they shouldn't resist. And it's one of the differences I make in the book about colonialism, which is the foreign invasion of other territories, and coloniality, which is to influence the mind of the ones you colonize, to help you colonize them forever, and to think there is nothing wrong with it, and to see the colonizer in the positive light, and to see themselves in the negative light, to see themselves as inferior, in contrast, distinction to the invader. So I'm an educator by nature. I think I'm a teacher. And I think religion and education were the most important tools of sustaining colonialism up to today. And so I see teaching in every sphere, of lawyers, of priests, of children in school, of everybody, as a method of undoing what they were taught either in school, from the pulpit in the churches, or from home. And so the miseducation is to teach people to accept that which is unjust, that which is distorted about who they are, that which socially, spiritually, physically, economically degrades them, degrades who they are.
Now, practically speaking, how does the miseducation of a black child manifest in today's South Africa, would you say?
Wow, if you look at the educated elites in South Africa, you and me interact with them. We are, the educated. They are the most compliant, because in being educated, they also imbibe subconsciously desires to fit in, desire to seek validation from powerful colonial forces. And it's subconscious. And so it manifests itself in every facet of society. And it gets worse. That's why I call it miseducation, because it gets accepted. It gets accepted by the victim as correct, because it becomes, over generations of time, it becomes the only way they know. It becomes the only way they are born into. You know, it's very important in life what you see when you come out of your mother's womb. What social structure you see, who's begging who's taking the hat off to who as you are a child. Yeah. And so that's the miseducation, and it was found in society in general, in the communities, in the schools, and in the church.
Yeah, you talk in the book about black on black prejudice as an example of this miseducation thing. Would you say that is one of the primary manifestations of this miseducation? You give examples of briefing patterns, for example, and how black attorneys and CEOs, black CEOs don't brief black counsel and only come to them when they are no longer CEOs and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I cite that as an example, but there are so many examples in society. You know, one big example. there should be no reason why people who are 90% of the population, black people, live by the dictates of people who are less than 10% for so many years, right? And colonialism and white control, whiteness or white power would not survive a day without the assistance from the black majority. It means it needs to find its reps, its representatives, its people on the front who are the same ones that it overpowers, to accept its legitimacy and to defend it. So what you see today is miseducation of long years of persuading the black child, the black person, the black elite, that under the sun, you are inferior and you must aspire to be like the one that oppressed you, speak like them, learn like them, work like them, laugh like them, speak like them, eat like them, and chew like them. And that's what we are doing. Otherwise, dispossession and white control would not exist. But it takes a psychological form as well, where we then live, because that white power in every facet of life controls resources that it plundered right at the dawn of colonialism. Then we have to live our lives pleasing and pleading with those who control resources, physically pleading with them and psychologically subjecting ourselves to validation from them so that they can share with us the little crumbs that fall from their table.
What are the examples you give? You talk of a fellow black colleague that sought to have you disbarred.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that? I mean, there are people who haven't yet read the book who would like to have some detail on what's going on there. Hopefully they'll go and buy the book to read for themselves. But can you give some snippets of what
I write
happened?
that example not to target anybody. I write it as an example of exactly what you're saying. It's not one person. It was actually a group of people. They write that they are called concerned advocates. And for me, it's not personal per se, as much as the pain is personal when people target you. It's what I call spiritual death, social castration. It's people who wanted me dead, alive. But they don't want Muzi Sikhakhane dead, alive. It's people who spend their lives trying to target those fellow black people they think are not approved by the white establishment. At a personal level, it could be personal, professional jealousies, but I use it as a political example of how we get to the front line of targeting our own for no apparent reason. I use the example of that colleague because truth be told, it's people we've never fought with. It's people I have never said any rude word to.
Can you give a sense for people who haven't yet read the book, would like to know what exactly it is that this group did? They
produced one Sunday. I got and it came from, I got the WhatsApp from Advocate Busizam Kwebane at around 7 in the morning. Something complaint against Advocate Sikhakhane from concerned advocates. Now these are advocates, but they don't put their names. They call themselves concerned. That's the first cowardice. And this thing lines up tweets, we call it X now, whatever it is, that I'm supposed to have posted. So it means I was being accused of Twitter. You know, there's Twitter, there are people who tweet, support me, others condemn me, and all of this. So I was being accused of being the one who owns those tweets that either attack people or maybe support me and all of this. And as a result, I was being accused of owning them, doing this, attacking judges, and I don't even know who they are, but the different tweets that supported me, others condemned me. But it was saying it must, what it tells you, because I had a confession from one of them, and I'm happy if someone wants to challenge me, because I'll pull out that confession, that it actually constituted what I think is an egregious invasion, in that people hired hackers behind my back. In fact, one news house, I'm waiting for them one day to challenge me, did the same. And I have a report that they got from a hacker about me. So there was so much involved, but I raise it because it shows you, I call it black on black violence. I've always lamented since the 80s that it gets so hard between us that we prepared, Gozo's police were harder on fellow blacks in the Ciskei than even white apartheid police. Same with us in professions. In our quest to please those who are white, who control resources, who control our minds, we want to target our own. And I use that example not because I'm a victim. It's actually a colleague who even says, I wanted to kill him.
Yes.
And so it's a series of things. I use it an example of how physically what we call black on black violence takes certain forms in how we target one another, when actually we should be targeting the power that separates us, that makes us beggars permanently, that made our fathers beggars, that made our grandfathers beggars. Instead, we live our life targeting. If you challenge the establishment now, Ngalwan, before a white person speaks, you're going to get attacks from me and other colleagues.
Why is that, though? Is this part of this miseducation?
It's self-hate. Once you've controlled the mind of the person you're colonizing, you can direct that mind to like certain things, dislike certain things, and dislike itself. What I see it as is a dislike of self. As I have many black people who think I'm crazy, and others go to coffee shops to please their white colleagues that we are crazy, you and me and others who think out of the box. I don't see it as personal. It's the miseducation. It's people at those coffee shops. One colleague told me this in some white group and said, Muzi, most of us don't attack you. What we need to do in our group is to just mention your name, Vuyani's name, Dali's name, and Chaulana's name, and a black colleague will entertain us going for you.
A black colleague?
A white colleague told me that they don't have to attack me because a black colleague does it on their behalf. You just have to mention our names. But those are people who are in circumstances where they must beg for validation because they need briefs. And in needing briefs and money, they need to say things that they think white people like them to hear. Some progressive whites are embarrassed when those people do this because it looks a bit like begging, but they do it. It's the miseducation.
You do say in your book that this is something that needs to be addressed, and urgently so. How would you suggest we address something like this? It's quite pernicious.
Public education. We should have done this in 1994. We should have done this. You should have part of what was called the Reconstruction and Development Program. And I think we should have developed something called the Reconstruction and Development of the Soul, which is public education designed to counter the inferiority that sustained.
What form would this take? Public lectures? Or
schools, public lectures, churches. The retreat of the church has been one of the tragedies. And the retreat of community education. And we could have done this with greater leadership. In fact, I always think Mandela was a great leader, but a missed opportunity because he had so much authority. And under him, this kind of thing would have happened. But I think as great as he was, in some way, like all of us, he was also a slave to white modernity and traditional methods that accept the status quo, at least psychologically. And this is what I think we can still do. As PABASA here and lawyers, we actually need to teach people what I would call alternative legal cultures. And our political scientists must also teach our students alternative social sciences and ways, ideologies that govern societies that emerge from severe oppression and slavery.
Well, you and I are probably a lost cause, so we should be focusing on the young ones who are still at school, I would imagine, with that project.
I agree with you.
You've referenced right now PABASA. You and I were members of a GCB-affiliated bar, the Johannesburg Society of Advocates, before 2018, I think it was. Something must have triggered your decision to form PABASA, the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa. You had previously been a member of the Bridge Group, I think it was.
Island.
The Island Group, yes, in the Johannesburg Society of Advocates.
And then Victorian.
And then you formed, or you were instrumental in the formation of Victoria Mxenge Group. Can you take us through what informed the decision, firstly, to be instrumental in the formation of the Victoria Mxenge Group, and then what broke the camel back to decide that to be part of this institution called the Johannesburg Society of Advocates is not advancing the reversal of the miseducation and decoloniality. Therefore, we need to form our own bar, as it were, in the form and shape of the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa in 2018, I think it was.
Let me take back. That's why I wrote this book. And I start from my early years. Those who were at the tertiary institution with me when I was 19 will tell you, I have never believed that when you get rid of colonialism or white power, you must transform its structures. I don't believe in it. I still don't. I never did. And I'm not saying by this, as Lenin says, you can leave certain things, but I believe in the total destruction of structures that were designed for colonial imposition. And I believe that this idea of transformation, even when I came to the bar, even at VETS, wherever I've been very critical of the people who were oppressed, wanting accommodation and hoping that the structures that were designed to oppress them will somehow be transformed into something that wants to liberate them. So even as I've been in white structures, in white groups, I've never been convinced. And so that is the outlook I have about liberation, is that there must be a total collapse of something so evil as to dominate and kill a whole group of people. And so even at the bar, when I came to the bar, I wanted to learn, but I was naive about advocates, I must say. I thought they were intellectuals and people at the higher level of thinking about justice in society. I was disappointed. And so in moving to form Victoria Mxenge, I was trying within the structure, let's get a group of people who think alike about challenging the dominant legal culture, the briefing patterns, and see how we could change that. But the aim was always that Black people and all other progressive forces who think Black people deserve liberation must have something that is new, that is theirs. And I was disappointed that as you and me were forming PABASA, I went to a number of very senior colleagues, senior to me, who told me, oh, Muzi, we can't leave. We've paid so much here. Things won't work out. What if they get destroyed? There's so much money. And I realized that is how we get attached permanently. And I was always, not because we're going to provide people with briefs or money, because that depends on the market, but create a place that Black people know it's theirs. It's not perfect, but it's theirs, and it's the beginning. Of course, we can never be as settled as a bar that started in 1929. But at least generations to come will know we didn't just transform what we found. We were brave enough to trust ourselves that we can create something. And that is how PABASA was formed. It was not to create something that maybe can compete. We're competing nobody, but something that Black people can say, we didn't transform this thing. We started it. We formed it. We struggled. That's why I always say to you, for me, and the PABASA was the backbone of PABASA, was not the Silks. It's the junior advocates that took risks. In fact, I think the Silks were a disappointment. They're too attached to the system and they're too scared to part with the benefits they have. Juniors were the backbone and they took risks. And for me, I still say they were the ones who were able to understand the philosophy that even if you are going to starve in dignity than eat in shame, living your life on your knees, rather die standing. And we are standing, but we're dying maybe, but we're standing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to discuss what some or many would regard as a controversial matter, which is the impeachment of one Judge President John Hlophe. It started with the logic of complaint, as you know. I think you were counsel in that matter. So was I.
Yeah.
When it started in around May of 2008, when the Constitutional Court judges lodged a complaint against Judge President Hlophe for allegedly seeking to influence two justices of the Constitutional Court to make a finding in favor of former President Jacob Zuma in an arms deal case, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to start by reading an excerpt from the book where you kick off by saying, on 21 February 2024, then Judge President of the Western Cape Division of the High Court, Justice Hlophe, was ultimately and cruelly impeached. It was agonizing to witness, made even more painful by the fervor of those who orchestrated it. This action was carried out in accordance with Section 177(1) of the Constitution. For the parties that supported the impeachment, the irony of their actions appeared lost on them. It marked the climax of a long-standing legal dispute among the judges, and in some respects, it epitomized how readily Africans are willing to undermine one another in pursuit of validation. Now, you acted for the judges or justices of the Constitutional Court in that complaint and in the subsequent court cases in regard to that complaint. Now, there are various versions of what exactly happened. There is a version in the new book, Defying the Gallows, written on behalf of Judge President Hlophe. There is a version in former Deputy Judge President Dikgang Moseneke's book titled All Rise, a Judicial Memoir. And there is another version in your book which goes into greater detail than the other two. Could you take us through exactly how this thing started until it came today? Because clearly the way you have framed this, you frame it as a cruel impeachment. You take a view on this.
Yes, I do.
You're not sitting on the fence.
I never do.
Yet you represented the Constitutional Court judges who laid the complaint. Take us through your own experience as counsel in that matter.
Everyone who was involved in this matter will tell you that it was an emotional saga for all of us involved. And of course, it starts as a complaint that you are briefed to deal with this. It gets confusing when you are in it, and people can read what really made me a little uncomfortable about the fervor with which it was pursued, but that's just my feelings. And I got involved with it as I do in every matter. But a time comes in a matter when you think, my own conscience is telling me this is much, much more than what I think is just a brief.
Sorry, can we take just one step back? How did you get to be involved in that case?
I say it in the book, but people can buy it and see. But I do say that I was phoned by the then Chief Justice Pius Langa in the middle of the night. I think he was in New York. And he wanted me to be involved. And I think Gilbert Marcus SC had already been engaged by those judges that were at the forefront of the complaint. I don't mean complainants, but those who were driving it. And so that's how I got involved.
Okay.
And at the time, yes, it was the fact that this had happened. And it was quite a difficult moment. And then people do it easily and all of this. It was difficult, as I say, for everyone involved in this matter. It was just difficult. And I got involved in it and doing it as professionally as we could. But a time came me where, in fact, I think I threatened to leave first very early. And we resolved that difference. And I was becoming uncomfortable with a matter that I think has external influences, or inadvertently is pursuing an agenda that I wasn't comfortable with. And I was not judging whether Hlophe was right or wrong, whether the Constitution. I was just uncomfortable. But to give the context of why I call it cruelly, it's a political feeling I have that, we've not done to apartheid killers, apartheid judges, apartheid bureaucrats, some of whom are still very active in this state. We've not done what we've done to our own. And I think something must be said about the fervor with which we pursue each other. It relates to the subject you and me were dealing with. I do believe that there was a case to answer, but I don't believe that the complaint was something that judges don't do if they are honest, to discuss something amongst themselves. You've been an acting judge yourself at the tea room, and I have been. Really, if there's a judge in this country who will tell me he's never discussed intricacies of a matter with another judge, he must not be trusted.
Why would you think the justices of the Constitutional Court, I'm lumping them together for present purposes, because at some stage there was a split there. There were two judges on one end, maybe more than just two splits, because there were one or two judges who never attended any of the meetings by the Constitutional Court judges in discussing this complaint. Why would you think there was such enthusiasm among those who were leading the complaint to lodge a complaint against Justice President Hlophe?
Let me tell you the official position is that it's because they are better proponents of ethics. It means they were driven by their honesty and desire for a clean judiciary, but that's their version. But I think you must not rule out the fact that I think amongst the judges generally in the country, career judges, people are always looking who will become what when. And I do think that amongst those who are black, who could become successors to Chief Justice Langa and beyond, I think you would count Hlophe. You would definitely count him. And I do think, not amongst the judges, I don't know, but I think outside, there were people who were worried about that possibility. And that is why the matter became not just a complaint between judges, it became a matter in the media, pursued in particular ways, and others had other ambitions. So I think it was a matter that was honestly pursued by some, pursued by others because they are looking at the future and who will take over. And I think that politics continues today. I think many people who control processes know exactly, Riani, you will not be Chief Justice and I will not, and Dali won't. And they know who will be because they plan these things. And I think this had a component of that, a fight that I call it a comedy of errors, because it's something that I think could have dealt with differently, and I don't think was something for which someone so cruelly could have no pension, be taken out. I think it didn't constitute what it became.
Well, it had been dealt with differently, hadn't it? In 2009,
yes,
a committee of the Judicial Service Commission found that there is nothing that raises eyebrows here, dismissed both the complaint by the Constitutional Court judges and Justice Hlophe's complaint against the Constitutional Court judges. But then, was it an NGO that went to court and challenged that decision, and the premier in the Western Cape said it wasn't properly constituted, and then it was all reversed, and then it came back to the courts.
Well, as they say, Upper Mangam, didn't I tell you that this case was also about forces that were watching out there, whose desires were, how can we neutralize this person from EMFA becoming something? And at that point, it was not the complainants, so-called complainants, that were unhappy. It was forces that I perceived were driving certain things in the media about this. And it's what I had become uncomfortable about. That I was involved in a matter that I thought was an honest determination of whether or not this constituted gross misconduct, impeachable gross misconduct. But I realized, as those forces exposed themselves later, that this was a matter about other things. And we continue to do this. Those NGOs, Vianney, continue to wield a powerful hand in this country in determining the direction, and they are not acting in the interest of the black majority. And I'm not saying they are wrong. They are acting in the interest of their own white, sectarian, neoliberal ambitions. We should counter it unashamedly with our own, but instead, because we are powerless, because we exist to validate ourselves through pleasing them or becoming apathetic, we keep quiet. They are fine. They are fighting for the interest to maintain the status quo, to maintain white power, to control all levers of power. We who want liberation, complete liberation of our people, who must be able to unashamedly counter those minorities, but we don't, because we don't have power. We don't have power in the mind, we don't have power in the bank, and we don't have power physically. We own nothing.
Okay, you highlight, well, you go into greater detail, more than just highlight, on how the complaint arose at the various stages. So we won't go into that. If people want to understand the origins of the complaint, they'll buy the book and read it for themselves. Now, you correctly pointed out that both you and I were involved in the matter as counsel at opposing sides. You were acting for the Constitutional Court judges. I was acting for Justice President Hlophe. At some stage, though, the two judges who were alleged to have been improperly influenced, or in relation to whom there was an attempt, allegedly, to influence them to fight in favor of the former judge president, split from the other judge, and they sought separate legal representation.
Yes.
That's Justice Jafta and Justice Nkabinde. And at some stage they said, as I recall, that they were not complainants. How then, from your recollection, how does a complaint continue when the two proponents or the two persons who are alleged to have been sought to be influenced say they don't want to be part of this, and as a result they are seeking separate legal representation? How does that come out? How are these reconcilable?
Yeah, I would say you would have to speak to the two of them, but I can speculate about my observation, but I think the most accurate may be how they felt. My observation was that this matter became so uncomfortable for all involved, particularly them. Remember, Judge Jafta had not complained. And I think the discussion had happened a long time. Both Jafta and Kabinde, by the way, have impeccable reputation as people. And I could see that this thing is pursued in a manner that also inadvertently doubts them, that they could be influenced. And I think they felt that pain themselves, that while pursuing this complaint, there was a suggestion, unsaid suggestion, that there was something wrong with them. And so they must prove to the others. And of course, I also sensed that those who were pursuing vociferously had this advantage. No one wants to be known as unethical. So I think the others were sort of there, but knowing, but this is not how I interpreted this discussion, and this is not how I thought of it, and I would not be influenced by it. So the effect of that discussion would not have been persuading them to find in a particular way. And that's how they had seen it. And I think more and more, and without the others saying, there was a discomfort in many of us. I mean, I would tell you, as I say in the book, you would be shocked that even the Chief Justice Langa had his own discomforts about this, and I'm sure Judge Msenege and others, every person involved, I think, had emotional difficulties with this case. But my observation, or let me say my discomfort at some point, apart from the fact that this was a method of what was taking my time and emotionally draining, I was tired of being part of something later I felt was an extrajudicial pursuit of somebody for threats that have nothing to do with ethics.
Yes.
And I didn't want to be part of that. I didn't want that to occupy my mind, and I was tired of it, and those were the energy for it. And I didn't hate Hlophe that much that I wanted him cruelly punished. No. And I'm not talking about guilt or innocence. I don't have that desire for any human being to be thrown to the dogs. No.
Why would you think, I may have asked this question but differently, why would you think that Hlophe in particular was the target of a complaint like this? I mean, let's take an example. If any other judge, not Hlophe, had visited Constitutional Court justices, because you lay out in the book that this doesn't start with Judge Hlophe making a phone call, going to the Constitutional Court to talk about the Zuma cases. It started previously at some function in Pretoria, and there were exchange of views and numbers and so on, and promises that we'll come and visit you when I'm next in Johannesburg. But had it been, I don't know, I don't want to name anyone, but had it been a different judge, do you think this would have happened? And if not, why Justice Hlophe in particular was the target of this?
Well, I think you must know that there are a couple of judges, black judges, very good judges that were the pioneers, and that were destined for greatness for anyone observing. And that's Judge Raymond Zondo, John Hlophe, Pius Langa. Well, he reached those levels, and many others. So it was easy for people to know who amongst black judges is destined to become the Chief Justice or Deputy Chief Justice. It was not difficult. Defying the ConCourt himself was destined for greatness. So I think those who had particular candidates in mind are threatened by, it always happens. The reason we fight each other in this profession itself is that people don't want Ngalana must not be known as better than me and all of this. So there was that element so the tussle was not, anyone who thinks that tussle was not about the future of the judiciary is not being honest. I think, but also, Vianney, the ethics that are applied to you and me who are black don't apply always to our white counterparts. And the reason is because you and me are African, we are black, we are supposed not to be ethical, we are little children that don't know ethics and all of that. And the rules that are applied to you and me are applied because the world is white and we are the outsiders that must be guarded, regulated, and watched all the time. But I think people know, they've had conversations like that amongst themselves as white judges and everyone else, but they regard themselves as more ethical. They can do more than you do. And you see it in the profession as well. And Vianney, as advocates profession, there are people in this profession who've done worse things and they got out of lightly because the rules apply more to you and me because we are savages.
In this segment, I'd like us to talk about the judiciary. You say very serious things about the judiciary in South Africa in the book. And I'd like to see your expansion on what informed this thinking, and we'll do so by going to some excerpts in the book, just to give a taste of what we are talking about. In one instance, you write, "Let me get myself into trouble now." The paragraph opens in those lines, and you go on to say, "From what I have observed in various judgments lately, in the high courts in particular, I have several concerns about the reasoning, independence, and integrity of the judiciary. I have grave concerns. I'm of the view that many judges are unconscious victims of popular sentiment and sponsored grand narratives in society. Many of them dispense injustice in the belief that they are being patriotic and associating with the right side." Right?
Yeah.
And on another occasion, you say, "I do not think we have sufficiently honest people in our judiciaries all over the world, particularly in South Africa." And by the way, this doesn't appear to be a view that is only held by you, but I'll come back to this. In another instance, you say, "There was no way President Zuma was going to win a case, even if it was a clear one. I had already accepted this reality. The climate did not allow for it, and we are not blessed with a truly independent and confident judiciary. Ours is a judiciary filled by career judges who watch where the wind is blowing as they prepare for their next application for promotion to the next level of the judicial ladder." One more. You say, although this is a matter that you were doing with another junior here, you say, "Although I thought the case was straightforward, I had known our judiciary long enough to know that they were unlikely to find against President Ramaphosa." This is a CR17 case. "At least not during that period. In fact, had all the allegations against President Ramaphosa been leveled against President Zuma about funding of an internal ANC campaign, the judges and many who defended President Ramaphosa would have been horrified. In my first consultation with Advocate Mkhwebane, I expressed my doubts that South African courts would find against President Ramaphosa in a matter of this nature. For the first time, I boldly told a client that our career judges are more aligned to power than they are to justice. I had seen enough of this judicial immaturity and bias in cases of a political nature. The very same people that claim to be apolitical are actually involved in the worst form of devious political agendas in South Africa. They hide it behind the pretentious concepts of the rule of law. As I read the correspondence written by President Ramaphosa's attorneys, I knew that we were up against the usual arrogance of power and we had no chance at all. I raised it again with Advocate Mkhwebane that in cases against President Ramaphosa, we must accept that our judiciary does not have the spine to go against him. It is not President Ramaphosa's fault, but the sheepish docility of most of our judges in the game of political power and the advancement of their careers. Political power resides not only in government or levers of power, but also in civil society." And you go on and on in that vein. But I did say you don't appear to be the only one who holds that view, because you write that another senior counsel who represented Jacob Zuma expressed similar views. And you quoted him as saying, and that's Camp J, Camp SC, you quoted him as saying, and I quote, "I am absolutely convinced that President Zuma in a normal court system would be acquitted and that so much injustice has befallen him. I have no doubt in my mind. It is the courts I doubt, particularly after the NDPP has now cowardly decided to recharge him after the review case in the SCA." You report Camp J. Camp having said that. What was the context in which, firstly, Camp J. Camp said what you say he said here? And secondly, what informs your view of the judges in the manner in which you describe them in this book?
Well, let's start with the Camp J Camp. I met Camp J Camp had been in this and it had tired him. He was fatigued. And I don't think he was fatigued because he did not want to go to court because I think Camp J Camp is like me personality-wise. He's an academic who had high hopes that the judicial system is, and that's the naivety of most of us who are academic and all of this. I will admit to that naivety, and that fatigued him. I think he had reached a point where he could no longer prepare, because when you're representing what is regarded as the scum of the earth, you're always 10-0 down as you start. And I think he was not retiring because he was tired. And he told me, because he was old. He said, I'm fatigued. I can no longer prepare. And of course, I had the energy. I was starting, but I reached his point. And let me start by why I say hard things about judges. First, I'm not scandalizing them or a particular judge. Judges are holders of power. They are like the president and the cabinet. They are like the ministers and the members of parliament that we insult daily. They occupy no special place as repositories of public power. And so I talk about them not because individually judges are not great, they are not great people, they are dishonest, or there's a particular one. No, they are repositories of power. And I'm saying these things from a position of someone who prepares to do a matter. And I felt that we lack the maturity because of who becomes a judge in South Africa. We lack the maturity to be absolutely rigorous about cases that come before us. And I don't think it's because people are corrupt per se, and that's why I say it there. I think most of us, we talked about this earlier, we are unconscious about how grand and powerful narratives influence us. Judges vote. And so this idea that they have no political preferences is a myth, it's a lie. The fact that they vote means they have political preferences. And you can see them as counsel. And over time in these matters, there were contradictions in judgments that I just couldn't reconcile. One, a president is asked to explain reshuffling, right, by the same courts that later would tell you it's the president's prerogative. One public protector is told they can refer things to other organs of state. The other is not by the same court. And it's those contradictions for me that made me conclude that we need better maturity in the courts. We need people who, and I don't even think they must not be political. By the way, there's a difference between political and politics in political science terms. Political is everything. It means you must be aware of perceptions, you must be aware of psychosocial circumstances, economic circumstances, and everything. Politics is party politics and those competitions. And I think I found that judges, like journalists, like lawyers, like everybody, are influenced by what the dominant narrative is. And I am writing these things to encourage them to reflect about when they start a matter, let's say about Zuma or Ngalwana or Mkhwebane, is it not possible that they have a particular preferred outcome and they work towards it? And we are all like that, by the way, about bias. And so what I'm asking people to do is not that they must not be biased, is to be aware. When you are aware of your bias, you are aware at the beginning, and you confront it, you will be a better person, a better adjudicator. So the harsh things I'm saying most constructively, because I think we need those words as I say things. I don't believe in half measures. And I think I say them constructively because I think we deserve a better judiciary, just like we deserve a better executive and a better legislature.
Have you lost confidence in South Africa's judiciary and the judicial system?
Right. Yes and no. You know, in the ordinary cases of Rule 43 and the lease and all of those things, I think we are very dedicated men and women who are judges who are doing honest work every day. But I've lost confidence in the ability of our judges, even our executive and everyone to appreciate that we are a pawn in a grand scheme of global power. And South Africa is a strategic place. And unfortunately, we've not really analyzed power dynamics in society, in how those dynamics influence our perception and our work. And we can pursue agendas that we are not even conscious are anti-freedom, anti-liberation. And I have lost confidence, not in individuals who are judges, but in the system as it all. And when I watch the JSC interviews, I watch all of them. It's disappointing. No one has really been asking about judicial outlook and philosophy and the political understanding. The judiciary is part of a political system of a country. And I've never seen any judge who's being appointed or interviewed asked to tell us to understand their political outlook, because justice is part of political governance and their judicial philosophy. And I think I've lost hope because the entire system, not individual judges, does not appreciate that our spheres of government exist in a particular context, which is a liberatory context, a particular historical context in which we are trying to take society out of power of slavery, colonialism, and subjugation of one race by the other, which continues in different forms.
As you might expect, Advocate Sikhakhane, there are people who, in reading this book, and the things you say in relation to judges and various judgments. I mean, you characterize, for example, the judgment of the Constitutional Court in the incarceration of President Jacob Zuma as, I think, shameful judgment, at least the majority judgment, in as much as President Jacob Zuma was, if you like, I almost said sent to the gallows, but sentenced, not sentenced, but given a custodial sentence by the Constitutional Court without him standing trial, as one would expect when you give custodial sentence in a criminal setting. There are people out there who would say, you are a senior counsel, and when you say these kinds of things, that you've lost confidence, you don't have trust in the judiciary, that then you shouldn't be practicing as an advocate. That this is a contradiction in terms. You should find another career and become a preacher or a teacher or man cameras or something. What would you say to people who say that?
Well, it's exactly what I said to you. It's because we are unable to see from outside the frame. Even the idea that when I use the word shameful, I'm insulting someone. How many insulting words have been used against President Ramaphosa and President Mbeki and Zuma? Why is it that I'm unable to use the word shameful when a particular sphere of government has done something that I think contradicts the Constitution? I think it's something I say in all honesty. And if honesty, as I realize, honesty and being truthful are not part of the legal fraternity, I'm very ready to leave this fraternity, actually. I actually don't. I know they will be coming for me, Vuyani, many. And it's fine, because I don't define myself as a senior counsel. I'm Muzi Sikhakhane, a citizen, a freedom fighter, and a person who likes justice, and then I'm a senior counsel.
Well, in fairness, you do go into some detail in explaining why you characterize the judgment as such.
Yeah.
It's up to the reader to then decide whether that justifies it.
Let me just give you one example, because people say this, but Zuma did not come to present his side.
Yes.
That just shows you the level of depravity. So if someone was sentenced to death, even though it's unconstitutional, the judges would have no choice but to send him to the gallows, because the lawyers did not come to say, by the way, the death penalty is unconstitutional. Section 35 of the Constitution tells us that it's unconstitutional to send someone to detention without trial. Why do you need lawyers to come and present to the defenders of the Constitution, the judges, for them to say, no, hang on, even if he's not here, we won't do that. We will refer this matter for trial. He must go there, explain himself. So that explanation itself, that justification, just shows you what grand narratives and lack of honesty have become the defining characteristics of South Africa's body politic.
Yes, in fact, the Zondo Commission and lack of participation therein when he was invited, that is President Jacob Zuma, to come and testify, which culminated in this application by the secretary of the Zondo Commission to the Constitutional Court to have him declared to be in contempt. That really is the subject of what we're going to be discussing next, which is the participation or non-participation in the Zondo Commission that led to this application, and the advice that you may or may not have given him at the time.
Sure.
That's what I want us to get into in the next segment. I would like us now to talk about the Zondo Commission, the State Capture Commission. You represented two clients there. I call them clients loosely because I don't believe advocates in the referral profession have clients. Attorneys have clients. We have briefs. So you represented two briefs there.
No, four.
At least four briefs. While I want to focus on two,
sure. Yeah.
which is the former President Jacob Zuma and the former Director General of the State Security Authority. Arthur Fraser. I want to introduce the topic by reading an excerpt, or at least two excerpts from the book, where you say, we saw their strategy, and by there you're now talking about the people in the Zondo Commission. We saw their strategy and knew how to frustrate them in their game. Everyone was pretending as if the Zondo Commission was about the law. It was nothing but a political maneuver clothed with the appearance of a judicial process. We had seen all the witness statements sent to President Zuma, and there was no evidence implicating Zuma in any corruption, the subject of the commission. Although people wanted to pretend that what we were facing was merely a legal process, it was never a legal process, but a political war fought in a legal forum under false pretenses. As you fight a battle of this nature, you are pressurized to respect this perverted process and pretend that you do not see the game being played. You must maintain the decorum of the judicial process even when you see that the judicial process is a cover for some Orwellian manipulation. It is like watching a priest molest a child on the pulpit, and you are required to say, Amen, Hallelujah, because the venue is the church and the culprit is a priest. It is such abuse of the legal process. We knew the game and from whence it came. We understood the political mind games and the propaganda toolkit of the proponents of the state capture narrative. Most of them were corrupt individuals diverting attention from themselves by accusing others. Sadly, even today, there is a powerful racial group that never speaks about anything without starting with a reference to state capture. It is a group that assumes it is smarter than the African people and dishonestly parades itself as a paragon of virtue, when in fact they are the opposite of everything virtuous. Now, that's in relation to the Zondo Commission. You've been criticized roundly about the advice you may or may not have given to President Zuma to participate in the Zondo Commission when he was summoned by the Zondo Commission to come and testify. We know he did appear at some stage, but he did not appear when I think it was the issue of the recusal of the chairman of the Zondo Commission. Can you take us through that process? What exactly happened there?
Well, first of all, President Zuma did appear in commission, right? And he went there, and that is when people say he talked about spies and what he knew. And so this whole thing that he defied the commission throughout is not true. It's a narrative. Of course, at some point, he complains about certain things and not getting statements and thinking he's being treated badly by this process. And of course, he develops a particular attitude towards the commission itself. He has a particular theory about it, which he didn't hide. And so he developed a negative attitude towards what it was about. And secondly, knowing whatever relationship or lack thereof between himself and the then Deputy Chief Justice, who was the chairperson of the commission, I think he doubted that he was the right person to hear issues that related to him objectively. And so, well, let me tell you about strategy. You know, the reason people are upset about Zuma and not going to the commission is not because they like the rule of law or the legal process. It's because law is also war by other means. It's a forum. All of these things, people going to court in post-apartheid South Africa and say it's the rule of law, we're going to the court, it's got nothing to do with politics. Even that statement that this is law, it's not politics, is a scam by those who use law to pursue political agendas. And so we were aware. There was no evidence that Zuma, no one presented evidence that Zuma took money or was corrupt. Nobody did. But I know, we knew what the whole thing was. This whole thing was about those who disliked him, and they're entitled not to like him, and those who are his political opponents, because they could have taken him to court. Zuma would have been charged for things that the commission was supposed to find against him if he was guilty of. But we knew, and I still tell you now, the whole thing had in it a political strategy to put this man who's 78 or 80, put him there so that you destroy him through cross-examination, you humiliate him so that you can destroy everything that is about him politically. We knew that. And anyone who denies that, I can debate that with them. That was the strategy. There was no evidence that they could have printed. The Hawks would have arrested him. And so we knew. So in these cases, you also are able to see beyond the game. And we knew that the entire strategy was to present him there, and of course he would have been humiliated. And he chose not to at some point. And he said, but this man, I have particular fights with him, which I'm not at liberty to talk about him. They know themselves about them, and they know between themselves who lied to the public about that relationship. And they will resolve that as men one day. But what we were doing was to protect him from unfairness, from injustice. As to the advice not to participate, you know, lawyers are very...
Well, that's an issue. I mean, you gave advice. I don't know if you...
No, let me go there, because a lot of people did this. You know, we all became fair game because we were defending someone that politically wanted to destroy. You know, clients like this, presidents, former presidents, and all of these clients, you and me represent some of them, powerful people. They are not wheelbarrows into which you point of views. They have particular strong views about society. So as you advise them, you must also not, lawyers and judges are just arrogant snobs generally as students and later. We believe that we're so smart that our advice is superior to our clients' own strategic thinking. So clients of this nature are not your little children that have no particular thinking. And so you've got to respect a client who says, I hear you, counsel, but I feel this way and I want to do this. The example of that is so many people, clever people, some of whom said, it's his lawyers didn't tell him this. That on its own is because we are black lawyers. Which lawyer doesn't know that when someone defies a court, it's contempt? So people drove to Nkandla. Some lawyers, people went to Nkandla to advise Zuma correctly. Tell him what we didn't tell him. What did they come up with? Every time they went to him, he phoned me to say, hey, these people are here. They think I don't know what I'm talking about. He told them what he told us. They were not modest and humble enough to admit when they came back, all of them one by one, to say, we are sorry. He also refused to heed our advice. But they had gone there on the arrogant basis that they had the wisdom to tell him what we didn't tell him. And they found out harshly, cruelly, maybe, that no, we respected his view. He told me.
And his view was that he's not going to go to the Zondo Commission because he has, a beef or differences. What was his reason, if you are at liberty to say?
No, he believed that he would not, because of what connected them.
Familial.
Well, antagonistic and familial. And I'm not at liberty. I hope one of them will be honest enough to tell South Africans who between them did not come out clean, did not really say what the battle was about. I'm not at liberty to say so.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think and I said to him, well, you can't just not go. If you don't want him there, you can ask a judge to recuse. That's what's our advice. You don't just not go. And so that was the genesis of the recusal application. And Vianney, it was not a simple application. No one has been asked, no lawyer has done what I was asked to do. To tell a man a man from your rural areas, that I know, the man I'm proud of because of his achievements, and he's Deputy Chief Justice of the country. Very friendly, cordial man towards me that I know. And people say I was grandstanding. It was never easy. It's a matter I did with trepidation, but I had a brief to do. And to his credit, when I phoned him about it, Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, I said, Deputy Chief Justice, unfortunately, professionally, I have to come. I'm doing an application to come for your recusal. And he was cordial about it. He said, Muzi, thank you so much for professionalism, for alerting me. He knew how difficult it was. And as I tell you, Vianney, people say all sorts of things. It's not easy to stand in front of 4 TV cameras and 65 million experts to tell a Deputy Chief Justice for the whole day, you must recuse yourself, you're not the right person. I was not happy to do it, but it was a job. It was not grandstanding, it was a job that I had to do.
You then, at the Zondo Commission, you bring on brief by I almost said client, you represent President Zuma, who briefs you to bring a recusal application against the chairperson of the Zondo Commission. It's declined, right? There has been talk in the public media and on social media about a staged walkout by the President Zuma team. What exactly is the true position?
You know that story, It's like the SARS story, a lie told so many times by everyone who knows it's a lie, but they continue to tell it and until it's believed by the public. I did not walk out. Masugu did not walk out. Mabuza did not walk out. Mpilo did not walk out. Clifford did not walk out. You ask each one of them, the Deputy Chief Justice would have stopped me walking out. There's no counsel who stages a walkout. What the TMV channels show you is people walking up the stairs and all of us because it's tea time and they choreograph it with a walkout. That is the dishonesty of our media and they are unable to say we did not walk out.
Yes. I don't want you to reveal too much because you do go into some detail about what happened.
What actually happened, you know, but it was not a walkout and no Deputy Chief Justice would allow counsel to walk out. He would have been the first to call me. And people will see in the book how many times the legal team during that tea break went to the Chief Justice.
Yes, yes.
You know, so,
all right. I hope it does become clear.
Well, it's very clear.
Now, the Zondo Commission comes and it goes. President Zuma does go to the Zondo Commission to testify, but then this recusal issue arises. He instructs you to go and do a recusal application. There is this so-called walkout, which we understand is not the way things happened. Then the secretary of the Zondo Commission brings an application, urgent application, to the Constitutional Court to force former President Zuma to come to appear before the Zondo Commission. In the meantime, there's a recusal application in the High Court, as I understand it. Where is that? Has that now been finalized?
I don't know.
You don't know? Oh, because you resigned from the Zuma cases.
Eventually, I out, so I don't know where that is. But you're right. Historically, at a time, he was considering his options with the recusal application having been refused. And of course, I had been there that day, having postponed my trip to Durban for a day or two, with the Deputy Chief Justice saying he's giving his ruling and he doesn't, and he's not, maybe tomorrow. You know, I had to leave and they knew. But, you know, and then he eventually had lost faith in the fact that his entire recusal application, which is being reviewed, while that is happening, he's sent to court. And he took a view at that point. He took a view, not we took a view. I don't want to bind the entire team. He took a view that it doesn't really matter. And in this country...
So what doesn't really matter?
Going to court to express... to put his side of the story.
To the Constitutional Court now.
Yeah. He reached that point himself first.
Because the Constitutional Court had issued an order directing him to appear before the Zondo Commission.
Yeah.
He didn't go there, which means he defied the Constitutional Court order.
Yeah.
And then the Constitutional Court, in a subsequent application by the Secretary, to have him declared a contemner or in contempt of court, the Constitutional Court invites him to make submissions. He doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Was that his decision, or was he...
Everything was his decision. Everything was his decision. And
you must have advised him otherwise, though, because you know what the consequences of that would have been.
Of course, you do, and I say it in the book how that happens. But lawyers, as I said, are so arrogant that they think every advice you give a client is sacrosanct and must be followed. No, your job is to give your client scenarios and tell them which one is most plausible. But they have the liberty to make a choice. I can't say to a client who doesn't want to file an affidavit, or I'm out of this brief because you don't want to file an affidavit. Litigants have a choice to make, and he made his choice about those things. You know, you must find, there's a book I gave to President Zuma when he was in prison, and it's written a note from me to him. It says to him, "Thank you for sticking to your word, because when I advised you that it would be contemptuous and they would come for you, You said, I want them to send me to jail if they like, and you did it. Because he stood by what he told us. He said, let them send me to jail if they like, but I draw the line here.
So he did this out of principle, because I don't see any upside to this.
He didn't. There's upside. What do you mean? Upside, Vianney, sometimes is pain. Upside sometimes is sacrifice. Upside sometimes is going through difficult situations deliberately.
And living your principle.
And live with the consequences of your decisions. And I'm not saying people must like him. I'm not saying he doesn't have faults. But that's what he told me. That's what he told Mabuza. That's what he told Masugu. That's what he told Clifford. That's what he told Mpilo. We are all, I think, relatively good lawyers to know what contempt is. And this racist rubbish that we don't know that is itself racist bigotry that we didn't know, we didn't tell him. We tell him, but he says, guys, in fact, he said to me, that's what he told every smart, clever person that went to drink tea with him. They just haven't told us. And so he made his choice. And it didn't surprise him what happened. And when he didn't go to court, let me say what I say in the book somewhere. I explain it more. I also had reached a decision where, why go to court where you are sort of punished with costs and all of this? Because generally I had realized that, as a lawyer, nothing fascinates you as knowing that, I'm going to prepare, I'm going to find a legal point, and I'm going to argue it in the highest court in the land, and this is a great point. When you prepare and you know that you are preparing for nothing, you represent someone everyone does not want to find in favor of. It kills your spirit, and it killed the spirit of the team, and I think it had killed his spirit. And that is why we're amenable when he says, I don't want to go there. To go to do what? He still got costs against him not going. So, when I say there's something wrong with our courts, I'm not saying out of malice. I'm saying out of a really constructive desire that we reflect, we think again. And that's why I'm so happy at this point, because I think we have a new Chief Justice. There's a beginning of a change. And I think we need new thinking, new people. And I always say, Vianney, a judge is not just someone who knows the law, because my mother can know the law. Everyone can know the law. It requires human beings who are honest, who are just, and have the capacity for self-reflection. Unfortunately, lawyers, politicians, and journalists were not blessed with the capacity for self-reflection. And they're not the right people to lead society.
There is another brief that you represented at the Zondo Commission, Mr. Arthur Fraser, who was the Director General of the South African State Security Agency. You referred to a written submission that he had made. You refer to it in the book, a written submission that Mr. Arthur Fraser made to the Zondo Commission that chronicle is not the right word, but that describes where this concept of state capture and repurposing originates. Can you take us through that, the formation of this project by various academics and so on?
Let me start by saying, as far as I know, and I'm involved in the matter, this matter is still going to be determined by the court.
Oh, I see. Okay.
No, I can tell you my feelings, because my feelings are no secret. The judiciary is independent. If it's independent, it can't be influenced by what I think. And so the legalities, the lawfulness or lack thereof of the conduct of the commission or Mr. Fraser, I'm not going to deal with that. It's going to be dealt with. But it just seemed odd to me that you want to determine the existence of state capture, right, as a concept. But right at the beginning, you call American academics, both of whom agree that this concept exists and tell you the same thing. And after that, you line up sweetheart witnesses that like this concept, right? And that they are entitled to believe in it. And then you have someone who would, I think, constitute or present to you, not correct maybe, but the antithesis of the other theory, right? If I were a person who's objective, I would have liked to hear those who support this notion, and I would have grabbed with open hands a witness who seems to come up in what he presents with a notion that what I'm involved in as a judge, which I believe is an appropriate, proper legal process, I'm a pawn in it. I'm a spider in some web because it's a political ploy. I would have liked to call someone who says so. And I found it strange, not unlawful, the courts must determine that no one was interested in hearing someone who presents what I think is the antithesis of what was the dominant theory at the time. Because the truth, if the commission was in pursuit of the truth, not finding anyone guilty, the truth is the outcome of analyzing contradicting perspectives. That's how you find the truth. And I think calling people who agree with a particular theory contradicted by nobody is no way of finding the truth. And I think Mr. Fraser's contradictory theory about this that I saw in his statements would have presented an interesting debate for South Africans to know exactly whether he's not telling the truth or the other side, the professors that we got from the US and those who came to say this thing exists in the form that they were presenting it. So I think it was an interesting thing because personally, as a political scientist, I think all states are captured at every given moment. What you must debate is they are captured by who and for what purpose, for just or nefarious purposes, and what is that they're doing. So we needed a much more intellectually honest and rigorous process to do this. But I don't think it was ever the desire. It was just
the Zondo Commission to get at the bottom of the truth.
No, I think all commissions politically, as much as they are designed to do the right thing, politicians sometimes tend to use commissions to confirm an outcome they want. And I think I'm saying making this criticism so that we can think more seriously and more honestly about running a country. You know, South Africans have gone through hell and they deserve a more honest approach to governance and a more honest approach than the usual political subterfuge.
You quote part of Mr. Fraser's statement as describing a coterie of academics having formed themselves into an organization advised by foreign advisors on this state capture thing. Are you saying that is the origin of the state capture concept and repurposing, or are you saying it's I think the way you phrase in the book is it's a curious interpretation of commonly known phrases or words like repurposing and state capture?
Yeah, I'm not the right person to say what is the origin of these things, but all I'm saying that a process designed to find the truth. I expected that someone who says something so serious about this process would have been called. I was also interested in hearing Fraser being cross-examined by the other side, by the evidence leaders, to test the veracity of what he's saying.
But he was never called.
But he's never called, and we are told he's never called. So many excuses. Oh no, he didn't apply. Oh no, he ignored it. for God's sake, how many people went to the commission and were not invited and did not apply? And this person who seems to be saying something that contradicts the very purpose of this thing, or he must apply, when he wants to cross-examine his accusers, they don't oppose. The commission opposed his application. You know, his application to cross-examine his accusers was not opposed by the accusers. It's opposed by this body that must want the truth. And those are the odd things that made me believe that there was just something wrong, either behind the scenes or in the origin or the purpose of this thing. And it was a missed opportunity, Vianney, because South Africa is a captured state. And we need to find out who's capturing it and for what purpose.
I can relate actually to the application to cross-examine your accusers, because I represented one group of people. And it was like third division, we call it third division in Cape Town, unopposed applications on a day. It went on the whole day until the evening. We were all sitting there. Semenya SC was there and a whole coterie of us bringing applications to cross-examine. All of them, one after another, were refused. There's no opposition. One after another is refused. So I had to think on my feet and decided, I'm not going to launch this application. Well, yes, we are on affidavit and brought notes of motion to seek permission to cross-examine, but I see all of them are just routinely being refused. So I thought, let me rather ask that the commission recalls those witnesses who said insalubrious things about my clients or briefs, and ask them to put these questions to them. And that's what I did, and that's what was granted. And they all recanted that evidence.
We see that's all that should have happened, and that's why processes like this shouldn't be used for political scapegoating or point scoring. Or, you know, I represented two clients. One is sent to jail for not coming.
And another one is
one, as big as the other one, who says big things, is prevented from coming by the same body. I'm just one person, and I fail to understand. This body that wants the truth is finding all sorts of justifications not to get this person who's being accused, who has big things to say about this very thing. This body is refusing him to cross-examine and be heard. I have this other client in the other brief who chooses not to go, does not want to go, is sent to jail for not coming. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. We don't realize it because, you know, Zuma creates irrationality in the minds of people across the board. And I think there was a level of irrationality amongst those. I hope one day when they sit and reflect, there is a level of irrationality about disliking the man. And I'm not saying he's an angel, but I just think people who hold power and who are educated like all of us are must reflect a bit about being irrational when we hate someone to a point where we're prepared to destroy the entire system and the entire country.
All right. One last issue in a few minutes that we have remaining. There's been much talk in the media about the CR17 Rule 53 record that was sealed or unsealed and so on. And the Deputy Judge President Ledwaba was interviewed on this issue by the former president of the Supreme Court of Appeal, who's now Chief Justice Maya. He gave an explanation of it. You were counsel in the matter, as I understand it. What exactly happened? And I think Julius Malema also asked a follow-up question to what Justice Maya had asked Deputy Judge President Ledwaba. What in truth happened
I tried to explain it in the book. I'm sure if I asked you what is the explanation from the Deputy Judge President, you wouldn't be able to tell me.
It went on for about 6 minutes.
So
I didn't understand it.
Yeah, it's fine. I think we here's his version of what happened. I explain it in the book. That's what happened. I just found it strange that when documents were submitted.
Okay, so your version as counsel who was involved in the matter is different from that given by Deputy Judge President Ledwaba.
No, I mean, I don't know what he's saying, quite frankly, but all I'm telling you is that you can ask the attorney. When the candidate attorney took the documents, in the normal process of sending them to court, he found someone there who wanted to direct them to the DJP's office. And this is way before where there's an application to seal them. And I found it curious that there was someone was preventing these documents from even becoming public documents, because once you've given them to the registrar, they are public documents.
I think the suggestion was that in chambers, the parties agreed that, if I remember correctly, that the Rule 53 record of Public Protector Mkhwebane is not going to be filed in the normal course, but will be sent directly to the judge who's going to be hearing the matter, because there were things about third parties there that shouldn't be in the public domain and so on. That's not your recollection.
So why would my attorney, Mr. Sianego, file the documents with the registrar if he had been instructed to send them straight to the DJP? I think that's an unfair justification. I don't know what the DJP knows and what he's saying, and I'm not accusing him. But to think Mr. Sianego was maybe unethically defying an agreement that parties said this would not be sent to the registrar is unfair to him. I think he correctly sent the documents where they should have been. He wouldn't have sent them, he wouldn't have defied the TJP and sent them to the registrar when there's an agreement. I don't think it's a fair comment.
Yeah. Okay, so but you do go into detail in explaining the CR17 sealing thing and what happened.
In the book, I do go through this when I deal with that and pala things that just worry me about our what I call in the book the sadistic rape of Lady Justice in our system.
Yes. Thank you, Advocate Sikhakhane. It's been informative, and I hope those who are going to be listening and watching, from judges to law students, will learn a great deal, as much of a great deal as I have learned in having this conversation with you.
Thank you so
very much again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Thank you for reading my book.
3 times.